Hello, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, and welcome to today's edition of the Pewter Pregame Show, Bucs at Chargers, presented by Walk On Sports Bistro. Great place for food, fun, and football. And that's what we're going to talk about today, football. I am your host, Scott Reynolds, and joining me is Josh Capo, another fellow Pewter reporter, and we're going to give you all of the insight and information you're going to need as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a big game, a must-win game against the LA Chargers, the last team that the Buccaneers will face possibly prior to the playoffs with the winning record. Tampa Bay has won 7 games. The Chargers are a game ahead at 8. A lot of folks didn't think the Buccaneers would win this game, but one man who did is my Pewter Report colleague, Josh Capo, who joins us. Josh, how are we doing this morning?
I'm well, Scott. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this game. Not that I don't look forward to other games, but we've seen this Buccaneer team kind of beat up on some lesser foes, and that was to be expected. I did a Pewter Pulse before the bye week saying that help was on the way, and certainly that's been the case. Tampa Bay has had the patsy part of the schedule come up, although the Panthers didn't really play along. They took the Bucs to overtime, but the Giants and the Raiders were who we thought they were, bad teams, cruising for a top 5 draft pick. And maybe the Panthers will join them, but they're playing much better. But now comes a different team, and as Casey Rogers and Todd Bowles have said, a different style of opponent in the LA Chargers. What can we expect today from the Chargers that makes them different outside of just the fact that they've won 8 games and they're in the playoff mix as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that these are two teams that have almost been mirror images of each other, in that the Chargers have gotten to this point kind of in the exact opposite way of the Bucs. If you look at the beginning of the Chargers schedule or the beginning of their season, they played almost exclusively bad teams.
Yeah.
I mean, the Raiders, the Panthers, they did have a 2-game stretch against, or a 3-game stretch against the Steelers, Chiefs, and Broncos. But then a Cardinals team that is quickly fading, then the Saints, the Browns, the Titans, the Bengals, they had kind of the opposite in what the Bucs have had in route to their 8-5 record. So I think that in some ways has inflated the perception of the Chargers. Now, that's not to take away from what they've done this year, which is they play mistake-free football.
Yeah.
And that comes down to they don't turn the ball over. I think if their quarterback
Justin Herbert
doesn't throw a pick today, that'll mark his 12th straight game without throwing an interception, which would break a record set by a former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, which is Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So they don't have a lot of turnovers. They don't commit a lot of penalties, and they play ball control offense. When you look at their offense, it's not on a down-to-down basis. It's not that great. They're one of the lowest success rates in the NFL, but their EPA per play ranking is, I want to say, 8 or 9 spots higher than their success rate.
Right.
And that comes down to their play action game. They get shots off of lulling defenses into just, we got to stop the run, and then they go over the top. Yeah. And they've been able to do it very successfully with their rookie wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, out of Georgia, not too far from where I live right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how they've created their blueprint. And then on offense, and then on defense, again, just mistake-free football. They're very punishing. They rally to the ball. They've got a couple of really good linebackers. Their pass rush isn't stellar, but it's consistent. And with that, I think they've allowed only one opponent to score over 20 points this season. And so that'll be a tough test for Liam Cohen, Baker Mayfield, and this Bucs offense.
Yeah, actually, it's 2 opponents. They allowed 30 points to the Ravens in that 30-23 loss. And then they did allow 27 points to the high-flying Joe Burrow-led Bengals, 34-27. But that was a win. So in only one instance has allowing more than 20 points per game been detrimental to the Chargers. And interestingly enough, and I don't think that Liam Cohen gets enough credit for this, but Tampa Bay has scored 20 points or more in every game except for the Week 3 loss to the Denver Broncos, 27-6. And what I was talking with Matt Matera about this week on the Pewter Report podcast is, you look at this 27 point. Now we're going to round up. We're going to call it 28 points per game because it just sounds better, Josh. They scored 28 last week, 4 touchdowns a game. And what I like about Tampa Bay's offense and what Liam Cohen has been able to do is just the consistency with which he has been able to put up points. You haven't had that 42-point game and then the 14-point game to average it out and get the 28. It's impressive. A slew of 30-point games, 7 games now with over 400 yards of total offense, including last week against the Raiders. People might say that was an ugly offensive performance. Maybe by Baker Mayfield, who had a couple of interceptions in that fumble, but otherwise 425 yards of total offense, 152 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, no field goals. I know the game tightened up a little bit there in the third quarter, and Tyke Smith's big-time interception against Brock Bowers was a huge play to keep the Raiders out of the end zone and from taking what could have been a 17-14 lead at that time. And then Tampa Bay pulls away in the fourth quarter with 2 more touchdowns. But Josh, this offense is just it's been a dynamo all year. And how many Pro Bowlers are going to be on this team? I mean, you might have what you had last year, which is Baker Mayfield and Tristan Wirfs heading to the Pro Bowl from an offense that is a top 5 scoring unit, a top 10 unit in terms of total yards. And it may not have a 1,000-yard rusher or receiver. Bucky Irving and Mike Evans might fall just a bit short of getting 1,000 yards this year.
Well, and that's the great thing is Cohen's done a great job of getting the most out of every player, despite, some of them, I think it's probably a lack of talent or a talent deficiency in general to be a quote unquote Pro Bowler. I will say along the offensive line, you probably have 3 players who are deserving of Pro Bowls.
Yeah.
Tristan Wirfs, I think everybody that's unquestionable, everybody knows about him. Luke Gedeke probably won't get it because of the missed time earlier in the season due to the concussion. I want to say he missed 4 games.
4 games, yeah.
The one who's deserving and has the play time, and I've been sounding the battle cry to get this man into the Pro Bowl because his year 1 to year 2 ascent has just been so phenomenal. And that is Cody Mauch at right guard. He has been absolutely incredible. I haven't updated this in a couple weeks, but as of 2 weeks ago, he had the lowest pressure rate allowed among all guards in the NFC, and he was 5th overall in the NFL. And then he went out and had probably his best game of his career last week. So there are certainly deserving players. And then, Cade Otton, he's had some stretches. He might get some looks for Pro Bowl, but he also plays in the same conference as George Kittle and Trey McBride, and that's going to make it difficult for him because both of those players are having phenomenal seasons. But Cohen's getting so much out of every player. If you look across this offense, is there anybody who you really say they've been underperforming this year? Maybe Jalen McMillan versus there were some high expectations.
Yeah, versus the expectations.
Coming out of the preseason. But even he, over the last 3 weeks, you can tell he's getting more confident. He's understanding where he needs to be. He's running his routes crisper. He's creating separation. And Baker Mayfield and Liam Cohen are both putting more and more trust in his hands. And, that turned out to be a 2-touchdown performance last week. And I would say he actually performed better on his non-touchdown routes than he did on the touchdown routes, which were kind of some gimmies based off of some really creative play designs by Cohen. So it's been phenomenal what he's been able to do. The 2 things I'd say the offense needs to do to level up from their current phenomenal performances, the pre-snap penalties. That has plagued them, and that is across the entire
offense, right? Everybody takes a turn.
Yep. The offensive line, just about everybody's getting false starts. And then even the receivers. McMillan has some false starts. Cade Otton has some false starts. Early in the season, Sterling Shepard had some calls, I would say some bogus calls for aggressive blocking.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they can clean that up, and then if Baker Mayfield can just raise the floor of his performance, because he's such a high variance quarterback, and his highs are as high as anybody out there. He can go toe-to-toe in terms of highlights with any quarterback in the NFL. It's just that his lows tend to be more often than most quarterbacks that play at his average level. and they can be lower than most quarterbacks. If he can clean that up, there's nothing stopping this offense, not even this Chargers defense.
Yeah, and he had 2 interceptions last week, and of course 2 interceptions at Carolina that really made that game close.
Yep.
So we'll see if Baker Mayfield can rebound and play turnover-free football, which he did for a stretch there. He had several games without a turnover, and that allowed them to keep games in Kansas City close. Against the Ravens. He had some turnovers, but there's been a couple of games where he's played really good football, turnover-free football. You mentioned Jalen McMillan, and the interesting thing is he kind of had that eruption game last Sunday with 2 touchdowns. And I think with we have to keep some things in perspective with McMillan. There were some high expectations coming out of training camp for sure, and he did have a good preseason. But if you go back to Chris Godwin's rookie season, and again, these are both third-round picks, right? Third-round pick 2017, third-round pick in 2024, and Godwin has become the second-best wide receiver in Tampa Bay history behind Mike Evans. We'll see what the future holds for Jalen McMillan, but there is some promise there. The team's still very high on him. But if you go back to Chris Godwin's rookie year, he had 34 catches for 525 yards and 1 touchdown. And if you look at what McMillan has so far with 4 games left, he is on a very similar trajectory. He's got 17 catches for 204 yards, but he has 3 touchdowns. And Godwin, out of that 525 yards, did not have any big games really until the last 2 weeks of the season, where he had 3 catches for 98 yards, including a 70-yard catch at Carolina. So, that's about 20% of his receiving total came in that game alone in the second to the last game of the season. And then in his final game of his rookie season against the Saints, he had a career high at the time, 7 catches for 111 yards, including a 39-yard touchdown on the last play of the game, a desperation throw from Jameis Winston in one-on-one coverage, scoring his only touchdown of his rookie season. So in those last 2 games, Godwin had over 200 yards out of his 525 yards. So he didn't really do a whole bunch until the very end of the season. Maybe we'll see a similar finish from Jalen McMillan. Maybe this game last week against the Raiders will have a little bit of a carryover effect in terms of confidence. And I liked how Liam Cohen gave him the first reception of the game. The first target went to him. But Let me ask you this, Josh. Does the first target today go to Jalen McMillan to help kind of kickstart his day again? Or does it go to Mike Evans, who I think at times last week was kind of the forgotten man on offense?
Yeah, I would want it to, honestly, I'd want it to go to Kate Otten out of anybody. That or a screen, just start them off.
Just in terms of the matchups.
I think the Chargers are going to be keying in on Evans. And I think that's been, you mentioned he was kind of the forgotten man last week. He played very well.
Yeah.
It's just the flow of the offense kept getting other guys open. Obviously, the run game, continued to pop really well. Rashad White had a phenomenal game. I think with McMillan, the interesting thing, I love the comparison to Godwin. I think there are some differences between the two in terms of their rookie season. So Godwin only ran 259 routes that rookie season. McMillan's already up to 254. So most likely at the end of the first drive of this game, he will have been on the field more than Godwin did in his original season. I think that goes back that Chris Godwin only got 254 routes run that rookie season with Adam Humphries as the wide receiver 3. I think it's an indictment of the coaching staff back then.
Oh, yeah.
But I agree with you in terms of the acceleration of progress at the end of the season, and that's what you want to see with rookies. Yeah. You want to see rookies at the end of their first season start to figure things out and just genuinely see them performing better. And I think that, this was something I spoke about, not this past Monday, but the Monday before this game, or the Raiders game, in terms of, I thought McMillan was starting to figure some stuff out. Like his route running was getting better. He was in the right spots. He was at the right depths. He was playing on time. And I thought the big things could happen. And lo and behold, last week, he had that breakout game. Yeah. I think that's going to continue. I don't think he necessarily needs that first target or that first catch for that to happen, because at this point, I think over the last 3 weeks, it's starting to click for him. He already has that confidence built in, and they don't necessarily need to create that confidence for him with the first target necessarily. It's not to say that if he gets it, I'll be upset. I just don't. I think he's getting to a point where he doesn't need it. It's not necessary.
One thing that's interesting is as Timothy Ward, who I believe is at the game or will be at the game today, has to say Chargers are 1-4 against teams with a winning record, and that's certainly true. That those games that the Chargers have lost have been at Kansas City versus Kansas City, at Pittsburgh, and then against the Baltimore Ravens. So those are the 4 teams with winning records that the Chargers have lost to. Their lone win against a team with a winning record came against the Denver Broncos. That was earlier in the season after the bye, and that was back in week 6, 23-16. And you know, Josh, again, we've talked about Liam Cohen's offense and how good it is. They've gotten really good at getting off to good starts. Now, that doesn't always mean that they sustain that. We've seen hot starts at New Orleans quickly evaporate. We saw the same thing last week against the Raiders, going up 14-0. Baker Mayfield had a first quarter for the ages, right? And then we saw the interceptions again kind of take their toll and tighten that game a little bit. But we've yet to really see, outside of maybe the Bengals game or that Ravens game, where the Chargers can really match points. And all it takes is one play, right? One breakout run for a touchdown, one deep shot or breakaway, catch and run by a receiver leads to a touchdown. And Tampa Bay's offense has done a good job of putting up touchdowns. We've talked about that. If they get out to a lead, do the Chargers have it in them? I know they have the quarterback with the big arm. I know they have receivers that can go deep, but they're not really built to get into a shootout and necessarily win that game, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And just to kind of hammer home the point you just made, in the first quarter of all games this year, the Bucs are 3rd in EPA per play at 0.151. Only the Bengals and the Cardinals have matched them. So the Chargers very much are not built to necessarily come from behind or to eradicate 2-score deficits. They want to play the game close. They want to take things into the fourth quarter,
right,
and then win at the end of the game in a 1-score affair. And the Bucs kind of MO has been to oblige. While they do jump out to these incredible, these very impressive leads early in the first quarter, it's that second and third quarter that can often do them in, because even in the fourth quarter, the Bucs have had to make a lot of come from behind wins themselves, and there's still a lot of 1-score games that they've been a part of. They're 5th in EPA per play in the fourth quarter, and the Chargers are, I'm trying to find it right now, are 22nd. Mm-hmm. So if the Bucs can get just even a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter,
can change the dynamic a little bit of the game.
That would bode very well for a Tampa Bay road win out on the left coast. So that's really, and that's where it comes down to. I think that this game is going to be won or lost in the middle quarters, the second and third quarter.
Yep. And if the Buccaneers are leading in the fourth quarter, it probably means they're actually doing well in the turnover margin. That's going to be super key today. It usually is. The turnovers usually tell the tale of the game. Sometimes when you're playing a lesser foe, like look at last week, Tampa Bay turned the ball over 3 times, still beat the Raiders 28-13. So, it sounds kind of trite and generic to say, but in this game especially, with the Chargers being in the top 5, I think they're the 3rd highest turnover margin team at plus 11. And you look at Tampa Bay, they're below the median, so they're in the bottom half of the league at -2. That's a huge discrepancy. Not only do the Chargers do a good job protecting the ball, they actually do a good job taking it away. They've got 13 interceptions on the season, and that's something that is probably a bit of jealousy for the Buccaneers. They would love to have that many interceptions. They drop more than they haul in, evidenced by 2 drops last week by Kayvon Merriweather and Zion McCollum. Of course, Tyke Smith was the one who turned in that interception. But let's take
I do want to give those two. I checked the All-22. I do not see how Kayvon Merriweather dropped that ball.
I know.
And then even on Zion's, it goes back to what is a catch and Bert Emanuel, and he had full control of that ball.
Both of those were very, very close, no doubt.
Very close.
Yeah.
But to your point, there have been plenty of other drops. Zion, I want to say, should have like 9 interceptions on the year if he could just
about. Yeah. And he said he was going to have 6. So, and as he told me today, or I should say, when I see him Thursday in the locker room, he said, I still have 4 games to get 4 picks. So we'll see. I love the confidence. Vegas is a little confident, a little bit. Typically, the home team gets 3 points, but right now that's a little bit closer than that. Tampa Bay plus 2.5, according to Hard Rock Bet app. So that's the spread for today's game. We're going to get into some matchups in just a bit. We had our holiday party at Walk-Ons, and if you want to book your holiday party, it's not too late. Make sure you give Walk-Ons a call. Absolutely fantastic place to go to watch the games, whether it's college playoffs, NFL action, whatever. It's the place you want to be at because the food and the drinks are amazing, and there are TVs galore.
Game day at Walk-Ons is just different. And it starts with the way our teammates prep each dish from our scratch menu. No shortcuts. We are hand cutting every single mozzarella log straight from the block. Hand peeling, stuffing, and bacon wrapping each voodoo shrimp. Hand carving ribeyes for our steaks and po' boys. And hand slicing, then tossing our boneless wings and our house-made sauces. With wall-to-wall TVs and food like this, why would you want to watch anywhere else? That's game day. The Walk-Ons way.
And there are game day specials Saturdays and Sundays. $4.49 pints, 22-ounce pours, $5.99. That's a Michelob Ultra, Bud Light, and Budweiser. $5 Heineken Silver, 12-ounce cans. $5 neutral, assorted flavors. So head over to Walk-Ons today. There's 3 Tampa Bay locations to serve you. Lakeland, Wesley Chapel up here by my neck of the woods. Matt Matera is down there by Midtown Tampa. That's closer to the stadium. So 3 fantastic places to watch some fantastic football and have some fantastic food. And, of course, Fan is at the heart of all of it. They are big fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we're fans of their happy hour. Hopefully it's another Victory Monday. It'd be the 4th Victory Monday in a row, Josh, if that happens. And, of course, there's one way to celebrate, and that's by going to Walk-Ons to celebrate from 3 p.m. to close. Yes, that includes Monday Night Football. You can enjoy their happy hour pours for $3, $3.99 domestic pints, $4 house wines, $5.49 22-ounce domestic drafts, and they've got some great, fantastic starters: $6 fried pickles and small waffle cheese fries, $7 boom boom shrimp and queso dip, $8 boneless wings, and folks, the 3 cheeseburger sliders that you're going to get for $8. Fill me up. They're so good. It's like one burger just chopped into 3. So it's a fantastic place to go. And if you can't get there tomorrow, that's fine. Go Tuesday because they have all-day happy hour, including $5 Tito's, a pair of happy hours, including Thursday night. So you're going to watch some Thursday night football, you can do that, 9 p.m. to close. And then, of course, Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. Walk-Ons, place to go for football, food, and fun. All right, Josh, we have a couple of super chats we want to get to. Thank you for patiently waiting. We'll get to Joel L. Rican with the $5 super chat. Thanks for being a Pewter Report TV channel member. Good morning, SR, Josh, and my fellow Pewter people. Happy game day. Yes, this is a happy game day. We have a little bit of lead time here with this being a West Coast game, Josh, at 4:25. I just put the injury report out as we know it from our Bucs sources, and I'll share that with you. It has been published on pewterreport.com. Bucky Irving and Christian Izien will be game time decisions. Josh, I think we can glean a little bit with the fact that they did not elevate DJ Williams as a running back, that they're going to try to do what they did last week and see if Bucky Irving can go. He had that back injury, and he tried it, played 10 snaps, 4 carries for 3 yards, really wasn't terribly effective, did have 1 catch on a screen, and then they shut him down after that, so he didn't really play in quarters 2, 3, and 4. But that's kind of a clue, isn't it, the fact that DJ Williams didn't get activated, that they're hopeful that Bucky Irving can dress, give it a go, and it might be a situation where he plays a little bit and then back tightens up again, and then it's the Rachaad White and Sean Tucker show.
Yeah, I think that it's indicative of 2 things. Number one, Bucky Irving is an extremely tough human being, and that he is probably going to dress, and they are going to give him at least a few snaps. I think it's also indicative of how much trust this coaching staff has in Rachaad White and Sean Tucker, right? So Rachaad White coming off of a fantastic game. You and I were just talking right before the stream. I know that a lot of people were calling for White to lose snaps and to lose playing time to Bucky, and to deservedly so in some respects, in that just Bucky is very special. But the calls for that White isn't a very good running back, I think, have been diminished as the Bucs have found that they aren't a mid-zone team. They are not a zone running team. They are a gap team. And as the gap carries have increased for both players, the running game, and even Sean Tucker as well, the running game is very good no matter which of the three backs are back there. So even if Bucky has to be on a limited pitch count, they feel confident that between Rachaad White, who is averaging over 7 yards per carry on gap scheme runs this year, he is the number one running back in all of football in EPA per rush under gap runs. That between him and Sean Tucker, who is as explosive as it gets when he gets the ball in his hands, that they can shoulder the majority of the load, and then Bucky can kind of be interspersed here and there where they feel like they've got a matchup advantage for the situation. So I think between the stable of backs that the Bucs have, which if people haven't been noticing, the Bucs have one of the best running back stables in the NFL. Pretty good job, Jason Light, for a third rounder, a fourth rounder, and an undrafted free agent.
Exactly.
I think it goes back to that offensive line and how fantastic they are. I need to make sure I shout them out or Bucky Irving will yell at me. Right. So I think that's really what this means, is that, yes, Bucky's probably going to go. He may be on a pitch count. But they also have a lot of faith in Rachaad White and Sean Tucker to finish out this game if need be.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers have also elevated Ryan Neal. And I'm not going to say that Christian Izien, who is the other game time decision, the safety who's got a groin injury, I'm not saying that he's not going to be able to play, but they're just super thin at the safety position anyways, already down looking at the depth chart, they're already down Antoine Winfield Jr. when it comes to their starter. Jordan Whitehead, of course, is on injured reserve. And then you've got Mike Edwards, who has also been ruled out with a hamstring. So Ryan Neal, much to the chagrin of Bucs fans, has been elevated from the practice squad. But they're hopeful that Izien does play. But yet with the groin, that's one of those injuries at any moment, Josh. It could just absolutely flare up, and you could go from playing to out really quickly. And so they did the right thing, I think, in having some veteran depth there. Plus, they're going to need them on special teams as well.
Yeah.
But they do have Tavier Thomas and Kayvon Merriweather. And you also have Tyke Smith, who can play some safety, but he's going to be your nickel corner today.
Yeah, it would be interesting because a few weeks ago, Tavier Thomas was pressed into action, I want to say, against Carolina, right? If I remember correct. First drive, he was there. They had him back at safety. And I want to say they had Izien in the slot, and then they reversed it and put Thomas into the slot and put Izien back there. I could see a similar change with if he's pressed into service with Tyke Smith on the field, because I don't think Tavier Thomas is very good in the defensive backfield. I think that he's better as a slot corner. Mm-hmm. But what I also think is interesting with Neal is it does give the Bucs some versatility in that safety's not the only place they're hurting, right? Because J.J. Russell looks like he's going to dress. I don't think there's any question about that, but he is technically questionable and he is dealing with an ailment. KJ Britt is out for this game. Right. So the Bucs are probably going to have to use Vi Jones, who had a solid kind of debut last week where he played some extended time. But the Bucs also ran with 5-1-5 nickel packages. Right. And I think that Ryan Neal could provide the Bucs with some versatility there as a part of a 5-1-5 nickel look, or potentially if they go to dime defense, where if you put him out there, he is more athletic than your average linebacker. Yeah. So as long as you're putting him on the field in that as a dime backer, essentially, he actually provides some upgraded athleticism over where the Bucs have been on at linebacker this year. And if some people will remember last year, he was pressed into that role week 13 of 2023 when the Bucs ran out of linebackers. And he played. That might have been his best game of the season as linebacker last year. So I do think that Neal provides some versatility, some flexibility if needed, for a 10 to 12 snap package as a dime overhang or 5-1-5 nickel backer.
Yep.
And don't be surprised if he gets on the field and doesn't look terrible if he's up in the box.
The closer he is to the line of scrimmage, the better player he is. The deeper he goes, then that's where you're grabbing the beads and your crosses and you're crossing your fingers and all that stuff. So,
exactly.
But yeah, he's a bigger safety too, 6'3", over 200 pounds, more in the Kayvon Merriweather role mold rather than a smaller safety like a Mike Edwards who looks more like a nickel corner. We have a couple more super chats to get to. Thank you very much, you Pewter people. Let's go to Redfish here. $4.99 super chat. Just to keep the defense honest, is not a deep shot to Evans or Palmer warranted today? I don't think this team has a lot of confidence in Trey Palmer. I really don't. His snap count has gotten shorter and shorter. You're seeing Raheem Jarrett get more snaps than Trey Palmer. I've heard too from inside the building that he's inconsistent. We have not seen the growth from him this year. Jalen McMillan is head and shoulders above him on the hierarchy in terms of targets. And there just isn't much of a connection between he and Baker Mayfield this season. So I don't think that Palmer, he's not a great fit for this system because this Rams-based passing attack is more yards after catch. It's run after catch to get those 20, 30, 40-yard chunk plays rather than the 40, 50-yard passes, those bombs downfield that we certainly saw under Dirk Cutter, Bruce Arians, and to a degree last year with Dave Canales. It's just a different offense that doesn't really manufacture a lot of deep shots.
Yeah, I mean, there are deep vertical routes built into almost every one of Liam Cohen's plays, but it is rarely the first read.
Yeah.
And now that's not to say that Palmer can't affect the game. Now, you may not see his effect in the box score. And this is what Dave Canales did really well with Palmer last year, in that he was oftentimes the deep clear.
Right. For the underneath and intermediate routes.
Exactly. To open up those spaces for other receivers. And Cohen can certainly do some of that. And Palmer's done some of that this year. So you could see that. And what happens is when defenses finally kind of get wise and they say, we want to stop getting gashed at the intermediate level, that's when that deep clear all of a sudden pops.
Yeah.
And then it's up to Baker whether he wants to take that shot or not. So it's possible you see Palmer on the field for anywhere from 7 to 12 routes a game, usually doing exactly that.
Yeah.
And it could open up. It really depends on whether the Chargers want to allow that opportunity. If I'm a Chargers defensive coordinator, is it Jesse Minter, right? I believe is who it is. I would almost dare them because Baker hasn't been great on the deep shots this year. Palmer doesn't necessarily have the greatest track record with Baker on those. Dare Baker to take the shot and see if they hit. I would be up for that if I'm a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
But I think that they can get Palmer involved in that way. And the other area that you can get Palmer is if you're going to run 4 verts 2 to 3 times a game, he should be somebody on the field for that. So
no doubt. Yeah.
So it's finding those opportunities to maximize his skill set.
Yeah.
And then taking those shots really depends on how the defense plays those coverages. You don't want to just take a shot to take a shot, throw it into double or even triple coverage. You've got to see how the defense is giving, but certainly feel it out with some routes that call for some deep vertical options.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Bill Devers with another super chat here for us, $5. Thanks for being a Pewter Report TV channel member. Why do we not utilize Rock, meaning Raheem Jarrett, like Chris Godwin? They are identical in abilities, tough over the middle, and contested catches and explosive. I did have a chance to talk to Jarrett about this. He did play in the slot at Maryland almost exclusively. And then last year, his rookie season, played the Z flanker position under Dave Canales. This year, he's been moved to X as a split end, and he plays behind Mike Evans. So he has some experience doing all three, but primarily in this scheme. And I even asked Liam Cohen about this when Jarrett kind of first burst on the scene for that Falcons game at Tampa Bay. And he just said, well, we see him more now as a split end. Chris Godwin is 205. And I know that Raheem Jarrett is rocked up a little bit. He's cut, but he's about 192 pounds. Chris Godwin has him by about 10, 12 pounds. He's just a bigger man. So that might be something we see down the road, but right now it's really Sterling Shepard is primarily the slot receiver for this team. And of course, they'll move Mike inside. They'll rotate that slot position, and you essentially have two slot positions when they go 3-by-1, right? Because you have the inside slot, the outside slot. So it's not like Raheem Jarrett can't play there or won't play there. It's just that's not his down in, down out responsibility in Liam Cohen's offense. He sees him more as an X for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, their measurables are very similar, but Godwin is just a more explosive player just in general. I think you did a really good job of highlighting it. Like their broad jumps, there's a 3-inch difference. That's a pretty sizable difference. Yeah. You go to just the overall strength of going over the middle. You mentioned that there's a difference in weight. There's a difference in height of an inch and a half. And even going back to like, I know it's not the most 1-for-1 relation, but like bench press when they were coming out of college, Rock was 13 reps. Godwin was 19 or 20. So Godwin's just a stronger guy inside there. And in the absence of somebody who can just go in and get slammed, which Sterling Shepard really can. If you look at Sterling Shepard's career, yes, he's small, but his contested catch.
He's a dog. He really is.
All but 2 or 3 seasons, he's been over 50% in contested catches. 2 of the 3 seasons that he hasn't been over 50% were the 2 seasons where he just missed almost the entire season to injury. Sterling Shepard probably is their best option to replace Godwin. I would actually say in the aggregate between him and Caden Otten, because Otten can run a lot of those choice routes. He's shown himself to be able to do that when they lost kind of everybody. So I'd love to see more Rock Jarrett. I've called for it myself.
Right.
But I don't know if he can be Chris Godwin light. I think Cohen has to be very particular in where he gives those opportunities to run.
I agree. Bucs Basement with the 199 super chat. Thank you so much. Ryan Neal activated over on the Herbert yards. Well, I will say this. You might see Ryan Neal play some on defense, but that would, what the Bucs are hoping is that would be just to spell maybe Christian Izien or Kayvon Merriweather for a play or two. They're hopeful that Izien goes and replaces Winfield as the free safety today. And then Kayvon Merriweather would be that strong safety, more of the in-the-box type player to replace Edwards, who is replacing Whitehead. And then you have Tyke Smith, who we're going to talk about in a second here as we get into our matchups, as the nickel, right? With Javier Thomas as another guy that might see the field a little bit faster than Ryan Neal if they need to go to a sub, whether it's 4 nickel, whether it's 4 strong safety or free safety. Javier Thomas does have some speed. He's a sub 4.4 guy. Not starter material, but right now, beggars can't be choosers in Tampa Bay. It's nothing but backups right now at the safety position anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas's speed, you can see it on special teams where he's made several plays this year, several very good plays, potentially special teamer of the year for the Bucs. McLaughlin probably has it locked up, but Thomas can at least get into the conversation. I think the other thing that people need to, if we go back to that whole over on Justin Herbert yards, I think a lot of that's going to come down to a game time decision on their side of the field.
Yeah.
Because without Ladd McConkey, who is a game time decision, he's questionable. He did not play in their last game. That Chargers receiving core is potentially the worst in the NFL. It's just not good. I mean, Josh Palmer is a solid NFL receiver. He is probably a mid-tier number 3. And without Ladd McConkey, he gets elevated to their number 1 receiver. Quentin Johnston has, improved from last year, but that's really only because you can't get worse than his last year. These are not very good receivers at all. And the one thing the Bucs have going for them is their top 3 defensive backs in terms of coverage, which is Zion McCollum, Jamel Dean, and Tyke Smith. They're all goes. I don't think any of them were on the injury report. Maybe Dean or Tyke Smith was, but he was never a question to play. They can lock down the non-Lad McConkey receivers.
Yeah.
So if that happens, and I would hope that Todd Bowles at that point says, if McConkey's a no-go, we're going man-to-man with our corners.
Yeah.
And we're going to challenge Herbert to beat us with a subpar group of receivers.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Samuel Fisher with a $5 super chat. What needs to happen for Bowles to be fired? I need to know who to root for. Okay, so to answer this question, okay, what is the best case scenario for this team? I think if you want to see Todd Bowles fired, Samuel Fisher, and I'm not calling for it, so please don't mistake that. What I'm about to say. The best case scenario for this team would be to win the division again, and to lose in the playoffs. Either win that first game and then suffer a loss in the divisional round, or lose that home playoff game and do so with the defense just cratering and collapsing down the stretch, to where it is at the end of the season shootout games that you're winning against the Panthers and the Saints, and then maybe you win a shootout game at home against a wild card team, and then lose in the divisional round. Or if you lose in the home playoff game, the wild card game, the defense is the culprit. I think that is what has to happen for Todd Bowles to get fired, especially if they win the division. It has to be that the offense is carrying this team, and that Liam Cohen is really kind of the star of the show in Tampa, and that Todd Bowles just doesn't have the answers to fix the defense. And part of that is due to injuries, there's no doubt. But at the same time, we have to be honest about this and say, okay, well, Liam Cohen didn't have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin for 3 games, and he has not had Chris Godwin since the Ravens game. And he's still putting up 28 points per game. It's fallen from 30 points per game with Mike and Chris to just 28 without Chris and without Mike for 3 weeks. So I think that's the scenario that would be the best case for this team, because right now, even if this team were to lose every game out, they're not going to have a top 10 pick in the draft. And you're right in no man's land, right? You don't make the playoffs. You're 7-10. Like the Falcons were last year. You don't have a top 10 pick, and you're kind of in the void at that point.
I think the juxtaposition for Bowles is tough, because you look at his performance with this defense, and you match it up with some other performances by defenses across the league. So Aaron Glenn, right, in Detroit, he lost Aiden Hutchinson. He's lost his entire starting defensive line.
Right.
And the Detroit defense is still rolling along.
Yeah.
You look at what in Minnesota with Brian Flores, has not had premier talent for 2-3 years now, still putting together, top 10 defense. They're very boomer bust, right? Like, if you look at the nuts and bolts of Flores defense, it's not that dissimilar to Bowles, but they get more of the boom. Even though they have, and they actually get more of the bust, whereas Bowles does not want any big plays. Flores is like, I'm fine with a few big plays, because we're going to get them on our side too and shut down a bunch of drives. But even going beyond those, Mike McDonald remade his linebacker room mid-season. Now the Seahawks defense is starting to – what Jesse Minter did. Do you know of any premier players the Chargers added on defense this year?
No.
They stiffened up the interior of their defensive line a little bit so they could get better against the run.
Yeah.
But Jesse Minter has transformed the Chargers defense with, again, not the greatest of talent. And they lost Asante Samuel Jr., who was supposed to be their number 1 corner, in week 4, right?
Exactly.
So you look at that, where all of these other defensive minds have been able to overcome these obstacles to put up very good defenses, and then Bowles has struggled to do so. Now, I want to give Todd Bowles some credit. It's not for lack of trying, and I just wrote an article about this. It's not that he's just like, this is my way, this is my way, this is my way. I'm not going to change anything, and it's just a lack of talent. He's played more in the sim world. He did more man-to-man coverage last week. Like, he is making some efforts to modernize his defense, to change things up. He's gone to more Tampa 2 lately, which is something I was advocating for. And you are seeing some positive results over the last 3 weeks. Bucs have the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL. And if you want to hedge that with the level of talent, sure, but that was against a Carolina offense that is actually getting better. Yes, the Ravens have not been good. The Giants have not been good, but you play who you play.
That's right.
I have a hat on from Pimp and Joy, y'all, and Bobby Bones, and he's done some amazing things for St. Jude's Research, and that's why I'm wearing it to honor that. So I'm going to come up with a better scenario for getting Bulls gone, which is the Bucs run the table, win the Super Bowl,
then he retires
off into the sunset on a high note, retiring.
Yeah,
I want to bring some joy to you all.
Oh,
How's that for a scenario?
That's a much better scenario. I think everybody would be on board with that.
At the top of the bill next year.
Tall Florida guy with the $4.99 super chat. Should we expect anything from Bucky due to his injuries? I can sum that up in one sentence. We'll see. Well, it depends on the back, folks. If the back cooperates, you'll see Bucky. If it doesn't, you're not. You're gonna see Rashad White, and you're gonna see Sean Tucker. Let's get to our matchups here, Josh. We got to hit these kind of quickly here.
Sure.
Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, where we look at the Bucs offense versus the Chargers defense. I'm a defensive-minded guy, so I like to just eat the cake first and save the icing for later.
Okay.
So let's talk about the key matchups: Bucs offense versus Chargers defense. Bucs offensive tackles versus Chargers edge rushers. The reason why we say edge rushers, plural, is they don't just have one game wrecker up front. They've got a quartet of guys with high draft pedigree, 3 former first-round picks, and Khalil Mack, who has 5 sacks this year, Joey Bosa, who has 4, and then Bud Dupree, who also has 5. Khalil Mack's a starter, and then Tuli Tuiapoto is a second-round pick, and he actually leads the Chargers with 7.5. He's a second-round pick from the draft. I get all that, Josh. I still like Tristan Wirfs. I still like Luke Gedeke. And waves are going to come. Yeah. And Tampa Bay is on the coast. They're used to the waves. I think Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke do a remarkable job against these edge rushers today. And I like them in the matchup. How do you see it?
I 100% agree. If you look at the edge rushers that the Bucs have faced this year, there is only one that is teed off on this Bucs offense, and that was Aiden Hutchinson back in week 2, right? And that wasn't against Luke Gedeke. That was against Josh School.
Yeah.
Everybody else, Justin School. I'm sorry. Everybody else, the Bucs offensive tackles have shut down. Just last week, yes, Max Crosby had 7 pressures, but you go back and you look at those pressures, they weren't on those tackles most of the time. And yes, this is a very deep edge rushing group, but I wouldn't say a ton of high end, like Bosa and Mack, I would say are both, kind of in that tier 2, tier 3 kind of pass rushers these days. And they just get you because they're relentless and because they've got good backups that allow them to stay fresh. I'll take the Bucs offensive tackles all day on this one.
I'm with you on that. Let's continue here. Bucs running backs. And we say running backs because we're not sure about Bucky Irving, folks. Versus Dan Henley, a linebacker that we liked back at the Senior Bowl out of Washington State. He is by far the leading tackler on the Chargers, kind of like Robert Spillane was. Huge discrepancy between him and the next Chargers defender. Henley has 122 tackles on the year. Derwin James is second with 77. And Henley also has a sack, but really doesn't do much in pass coverage. He does have 6 pass breakups. But your thoughts on this, mostly between the tackles, right? This is more of a gap scheme, so Henley's going to be involved, and Bucky Irving, if he plays, he's going to make a miss.
Yeah, this is one where I'll kind of like bifurcate my analysis. I think Henley against the Bucs and running game, especially with a lot of those guards and tackles pulling on counter runs, I think he may have some trouble there. But in coverage is actually where I think he may minimize the Bucs running back's impact, because while he only has the 6 pass breakups, he's very assignment sound.
Yeah.
He does a great job of constricting space, reducing the impact of passes over the middle. And I think that he could be fairly good in disrupting the Bucs screen game. So the run game, I think Bucs running backs win the edge there, but in the passing game, I think Henley can have a bit more of an impact and potentially make that more of a push.
I'm going to say a push as well. I'm going to give Henley some respect. The stats are real. He's a very active linebacker for sure. Yep. Tight end Cade Otton versus safety Derwin James. Otton's going to see multiple players that are going to be covering him. But in the box, in the slot, it might be Derwin James versus Cade Otton. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I mean, if I will give the edge to Derwin on that one. Anytime they line up together, I mean, Otton's a good tight end. He's become one of the best blocking tight ends in football. Yeah. But in pure coverage, if Derwin is lined up on Cade Otton, the difference in athleticism is night and day, and I would give that to Derwin James.
I'll do the same. Quarterback Baker Mayfield versus safety Elijah Molden. Molden, one of those Washington Huskies DBs that Jimmy Lake coached, and that's been just a position that has flooded the NFL. Molden is one of their top interceptors, 3 interceptions on the season. Very good in coverage. Not the biggest safety, more of like a Mike Edwards type than a Kayvon Merriweather type in terms of size. 7 pass breakups, 3 interceptions. How do you see this particular matchup, Josh? I happen to think Baker Mayfield is going to have a turnover-free game, but we have seen him throw interceptions to safeties an awful lot this year. Go back to Xavier Woods in that Panthers game. I'm going to give Baker Mayfield the benefit of the doubt. I think he has a bounce-back game.
I predicted the Bucs to win this game, and if they're going to win, then Mayfield's got to be clean. So I backed myself into the corner
by default, right?
of taking Baker Mayfield on this. I was going to say push, but I'm going to take Mayfield in order for my prediction of the Bucs to win to come to fruition.
Mike Evans versus Tarheeb Still. He's going to see a fair amount of, I think, from Cam Hart. Again, they'll move Mike around, so the matchups will change. But Tarheeb Still is a very interesting cornerback, right? He's 6'1", 196 pounds out of Maryland, a day 3 guy, but really maybe playing over his abilities, playing over his talent. He's got half a sack. They'll blitz him from the cornerback position. 8 pass breakups to lead the team, 3 interceptions. If you go back to that Falcons game, he was a thorn in Kirk Cousins' side, had a pick 6 in that game. Plus, I think he had 2 interceptions in that game. How do you see Mike Evans? Is he going to have another 100-yard game, Josh? Only 1 this year, and that was at Carolina, their last road game.
Yeah, I do see Evans winning this matchup, and I do see him going over 100 yards and keeping Bucs fans' hopes for a 1K season alive. So I'll take Evans in that particular matchup.
I'm with you. I'm going to take Mike Evans as well. I think it's crunch time for him, and I think he delivers. We're going to deliver some fantastic coverage for you at 4:25. It's when Matt Matera takes over at Pewter Game Day. 4:25 right here on Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to that. Also hit the notifications button. That'll let you know when we go live with any Pewter Report podcast, Pewter Pregame, Pewter Game Day, or if we have a new Bucs All 22 breakdown like Josh did this week, or Pewter Pulse as I did. So Pewter Report TV. You can also check out Pewter Game Day on pewterreport.com, as well as our social media channels where we stream live on Facebook and Twitter, otherwise known as X, and that is at Pewter Report. Let's continue with, I think, that some of the best matchups, really. Cornerback Zion McCollum. This is Bucs defense versus Chargers offense presented by Walk-Ons. Cornerback Zion McCollum versus Joshua Palmer. I think we're going to see Palmer matched up against Dean, and we're going to see Quentin Johnston matched up against McCollum. But this is a very interesting matchup here because this is more speed on speed. And if you look at some of the cornerbacks that have given, or I should say some of the receivers that have given Zion McCollum problems, it's been the more physical guys like Quentin Johnston. And go back to that 49ers game. Juwan Jennings, a bigger-bodied receiver, pushed Zion around a little bit, didn't have a great game for the Bucs cornerback. I think Zion does better against more finesse, faster receivers, and I think he takes care of Palmer today.
I mean, Palmer's big, though. He's 6'2", 210 himself, so he's got some size to him. But to your point, I don't know if he's the toughest receiver. It's just not his game. Right. And I do think that Zion wraps him up. But if Palmer throws a few shots that Zion's not expecting, a couple of push-offs, I think
could rattle him a little bit.
Get a couple of unexpected catches there. But I still, I was one of the first in on Zion McCollum this past offseason, and I'm going to ride with him. I think he wins this matchup.
I'm with you. We saw some dog-on-dog crime last Sunday at Ray J. Former Georgia Bulldogs, Tyke Smith and Brock Bowers going at it. We know who won that one at the end of the day. It was Tyke Smith coming up with a huge interception against Brock Bowers. right there by the goal line. That saved a touchdown for Tampa Bay and maybe saved that game. Let's talk about this week's Bulldog on Bulldog, former Georgia players going at it. Of course, we're talking about Ladd McConkey. If he plays, he'll be in the slot quite a bit against Tyke Smith. I'm going to go with Tyke over Ladd McConkey, who is dealing with AC joint issues in his shoulder and a bum knee. That's going to rob him of some speed. I like Tyke. If Ladd McConkey plays, he's not going to be 100%.
I am going to give McConkey a little bit more respect, and I am going to be a fence sitter with a push on this one. Right. I think if McConkey plays, when those two are lined up against each other, I can very well see it being one of those like classic heavy hitters. Ladd wins one, Tyke wins one, Ladd wins one, Tyke wins one, and just something that tape watchers like myself are going to immediately go to the next morning and say, I just want to watch this over and over.
I like it. Vita Vea, defensive tackle, who was a little quiet last week in terms of his statistics. Didn't get a sack, didn't have a lot of tackles, but that might change because the Chargers are going to run the ball an awful lot today. Bradley Bozeman is a player he's played up against a couple of times with the Ravens back in the day and also with the Panthers. So this is some familiarity here, but I like Vita in a bit of a bounce back game on the West Coast. He's going back to the West Coast where he's born and played in Washington. So I like Big Vita today.
Yeah, I went back and looked at their matchups last year because they matched up twice when Bozeman was in Carolina, and I like Vita for this one. Like Bozeman didn't exactly get like run over in those two matchups,
right?
But Vita won a good amount of those, and I like Vita for this one.
Yaya Diaby, who's done everything except get in the sack column this year, only has 2, but he's got the pressures. He's played better against the run. Here's his last sack against Lamar
Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, yeah, they're back in the Ravens game.
Yep.
And that was kind of a free running sack. That was more schemed than I think beating the offensive tackle one-on-one. He's going up against Rashawn Slater, who's one of the better pass protecting offensive tackles in the league today. Does he have any success today getting to Justin Herbert? I'm not sure. I'm going to give Slater his props today. He's a really good pass protector. Yaya might have better luck against Alt, the rookie on the left side of the line for Diaby, the right tackle for the Chargers.
Yeah, I will give you Yaya. He did get a sack against the Giants, but that was, I want to say, because the quarterback literally just fell down, and Yaya was the first to just touch him on the ground. I could be wrong about that, but I could have sworn I remember that because I think Matt and I were making fun of it. Like he finally gets a sack, and it's for the most ridiculous of reasons. Rashawn Slater. Diaby, I will give him credit. He's trying to win different ways. He is playing the outside corner more. We saw this last week against the Raiders. I think that he is still developing his toolbox, but that is a very good tackle tandem. And I think that whether it is Slater or Alt, I think that Diaby may get a couple of pressures, but I don't think he touches the quarterback. I don't think that there's a hit. I don't think that there's a sack in there. He may be able to speed up Herbert's process a little bit with a couple of hurries, but I'm going to give that to the Chargers tackles.
Last one real quick, Levante David, Gus Edwards. We're going to see a lot of Gus Edwards today. The Chargers run the ball. I think we're going to see a lot of tackles from Levante David, who won't come off the field again. I like Levante David in this matchup. I'm going to give old man Levante some love. I think that we're going to see 10 tackles plus from Levante, and I think you're going to see Gus Edwards being held to 75 yards or less today.
I think that the Chargers run game is going to do some things against the Bucs run defense. I love Levante. I think that he still can make plays out in space to a certain degree when just because of his amazing knowledge and just ability to predict where things are going. But when he gets into the hole, one-on-one with a running back, we saw it last week against the Raiders.
Yep.
He just doesn't have that pop in the tackles. The 4th and 1, he had things squared up and just gave up 2 yards. I'm going to give this to Gus Edwards, and I'm going to make sure that my address is not published anywhere for Bucs fans to find.
We really thank Elizabeth Reed for becoming a YouTube channel member today. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And we thank everybody for tuning into today's Pewter pregame show. We had a lot of fun with Josh Capo today. This was a blast. Matt Matera is going to be back for Pewter Game Day. That's going to be at 4:25, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And we want to thank everybody for listening and watching today's show. Remember, if you don't catch it live, you can catch it all the way up until kickoff. It's archived here on Pewter Report TV. All of our Pewter Game Day shows are. We'll be back next week for another Pewter Game Day show at 9 o'clock prior to the Bucs Cowboys game, which as of right now is slated for Sunday Night Football. Don't think it's going to get flexed, but the league has that option. That may come down to a decision on Monday based upon outcomes of today's games across the league. So for Josh Capo, I am Scott Reynolds. Make sure you join Matt Matera at 4:25 for Pewter Game Day. And we'll see you next week on another edition of Pewter Pregame.